I never thought my 22nd birthday would be the day everything changed. It wasn't the celebration or the excitement I had expected. Instead, my dad's text turned everything upside down. The message read, "Sold your laptop. Madison needs a new phone. Be thankful we feed you." That alone shook me. Then came the next bombshell. Also, you'll pay her $6,000 tuition by Friday. I stared at my phone, disbelief creeping in. I had worked hard for that laptop, saved up every penny, and now it was gone. Worse still, they wanted me to cover Madison's tuition, my sister, who had never been responsible with anything in her life. I dialed my dad's number, hoping to talk this out, but the call went straight to voicemail. My heart raced as another text came through. "Then get out. You're cut off." I couldn't believe what I was reading. My family had just made a decision for me, one that would change everything. The birthday I had expected to be about me had turned into an emotional wrecking ball. I couldn't stay there, not after this. So I packed my things quietly, and without drama. The next morning, things were different. My parents found out what I had left behind, and chaos ensued. My sister Madison was panicking, and my mom was yelling. But I had already made my decision. I couldn't go back to that life. Before I dive deeper into this, I want to hear from you. Have you ever had to deal with family favoritism? Or maybe you've had to stand up for yourself like I did. Let me know in the comments. And if you can relate, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more stories about finding strength in tough situations. Now, let me take you back to where all started. My name is Brooke Wilson. And up until that fateful day, I was just an ordinary 22-year-old college student. I was working 2 part-time jobs and trying to make it through my final semester. I had been saving every bit of extra cash for a place of my own, but my parents insisted I stay at home to save money. Little did I know, staying there wasn't going to work out in my favor at all. That morning started like any other birthday. I woke up early, got dressed for my morning shift as a waitress, and made my way downstairs. My mom, Karen, was in the kitchen, absorbed in her phone as usual. "Happy birthday, Brooke," she said without even looking up. "Thanks, Mom," I replied, hoping for more, maybe a card or even a small gift, but nothing came. I had learned not to expect much over the years, so I just swallowed the disappointment. "Oh, don't forget, you need to drive Madison to her friend's house later," she added, still scrolling through her feed. I nodded, hiding my frustration. The one thing I could rely on, though, was my laptop. It sat on the counter, a MacBook Pro that I had purchased 3 months ago after saving tips from my waitressing job. I had worked for nearly a year to buy it, and it meant the world to me. It was filled with everything important: my thesis research, job applications, photos, and everything else I cared about. I closed the lid carefully, packed it into my bag, and left for work. This wasn't the first birthday where my sister Madison's needs had taken precedence. On my 16th birthday, my parents canceled my small party because Madison had a last-minute soccer tournament. When I turned 18, the money my grandparents gave me as a graduation gift mysteriously went to Madison's car down payment. By the time I turned 21, I had stopped expecting anything special. At the Sunrise Diner, where I worked, it was business as usual, but my coworkers remembered my birthday. Tammy from the kitchen brought cupcakes, and my manager, Richard, even gave me a small gift card to my favorite bookstore. "You're one of our hardest workers," Richard said, his eyes crinkling with kindness. "We appreciate you around here." It was a small gesture, but it meant more than he knew. It was nice to feel appreciated for once. During my afternoon break, I sat outside in the back alley of the diner, sipping on a cup of coffee. My phone buzzed, and I looked down to see a message from my dad. The text was simple, but it sent a wave of panic through me. "Sold your laptop. Madison needs a new phone. Be grateful we feed you." I blinked, trying to make sense of it, sure that I had read it wrong. My fingers trembled as I dialed his number, hoping to hear his voice and get an explanation, but he didn't pick up. A second message followed shortly after. "Also, you'll pay her tuition. $6,000 by Friday." My world tilted sideways. My laptop, my property that I had saved for and bought with my own money, was sold without my permission. And now I was being asked to pay Madison's tuition. The same sister who had failed out of 3 college programs because she preferred partying over studying. My chest tightened and tears blurred my vision. How could they do this to me? How could they take what was mine and demand more from me? I was being asked to pay for her education when I had barely enough to make ends meet myself. With shaking hands, I typed out the only response I could muster. No chance. His reply was immediate. Then get out. You're cut off. Just like that. My family was done with me. All because I wouldn't fund Madison's 4th attempt at college after they had taken my property. I somehow made it through the rest of my shift, moving on autopilot, taking orders, and delivering food. My mind raced, trying to figure out what to do next. Where would I go? How could I finish my degree without the research and notes that were on that laptop? I felt like everything I had worked for was being ripped away in an instant. When my shift ended, Richard noticed I was distracted. Everything okay, Brooke? You seem a million miles away, he asked, concern in his voice. I forced a smile. Just family stuff. Nothing I can't handle. But as I walked to my car, my old used Honda Civic, that I'd also bought with my own savings, I knew my life had just taken a drastic turn. I didn't know what was next, but I was sure of one thing. I had to get out of that house. I drove straight to Olivia's apartment, my best friend since high school. The streets blurred through my tear-filled eyes, and the familiar route felt like the only thing that made sense in that moment. Olivia had been my rock through so much, and if anyone would understand what I was going through, it was her. When she opened the door, she immediately saw the distress on my face. "Oh, Brooke," she said, pulling me into a hug. "What did they do?" This time, I collapsed onto her couch, my hands still shaking as I showed her the text messages from my dad. The words felt unreal as I read them aloud. "Your dad sold your laptop?" she asked, her voice rising in disbelief. "The one you saved for a year to buy? And now he wants you to pay Madison's tuition? That's insane." I nodded, wiping away my tears. "It's always been like this. Madison gets everything, and I'm just dot here. But this time, they've gone too far." Olivia made us both tea as I recounted the long history of favoritism in my family. I told her about the countless times Madison had been treated like the golden child while I was expected to just handle everything on my own. "Remember my high school graduation?" I asked her. Olivia nodded grimly. It was still a painful memory. I had been announced as the recipient of a prestigious scholarship, and as I walked up to the stage, my mom intercepted me to show me a text from Madison. Madison had just been named captain of her junior varsity cheerleading squad. My achievement, the culmination of 4 years of hard work, was completely overshadowed. "And remember when I got that internship at Thompson Marketing?" I continued. Olivia nodded again. "My parents couldn't come to the reception because Madison had a hair appointment for prom." Olivia shook her head. "I remember. I've never understood why they treat you so differently. It wasn't just the big moments, though. My belongings had always been fair game for Madison. My clothes would disappear from my closet, my books would be damaged and left under her bed, and my first camera, a gift from my grandmother, was borrowed by Madison for a trip and returned with a cracked lens. I've worked 2 jobs through college, Olivia," I said, running my hands through my hair in frustration. Meanwhile, Madison failed out of 3 different programs because she was too busy partying. She crashed her 3rd car last month, and instead of facing consequences, she gets a new phone. Olivia's eyes widened. "Wait, what about your thesis? Wasn't all your research on that laptop?" The reminder sent a fresh wave of panic through me. Everything was on there, my thesis, my job applications, my portfolio, everything. I buried my face in my hands. "Years of work gone." Olivia didn't hesitate. "You can stay here as long as you need," she said, her voice firm. "The sofa pulls out, and Teresa is visiting her parents for the next 2 weeks." Teresa was Olivia's quiet, nursing student roommate who spent most of her time on clinical rotations, so there was more than enough space for me. I was grateful for Olivia's kindness. I should call Aunt Diane, I said, reaching for my phone. Diane was my father's sister, and unlike him, she'd always treated me with kindness and respect. She'd always been my safe place, the one person in my family I could count on. When she picked up, I barely got the words out before she said, "Brooke, happy birthday, sweetheart." I could tell she didn't know what had happened yet. I quickly explained the situation, and she sighed. "Frank has always favored Madison," Aunt Diane said. "Your grandparents tried to talk to him about it years ago, but he wouldn't listen. But selling your property and demanding you pay Madison's tuition? That crosses a line." I could hear the concern in her voice. "I don't know what to do, Aunt Diane," I said, my voice breaking. "This has been building for years, Brooke," she replied. "Maybe it's time you took a stand once and for all." After we hung up, Olivia and I sat at her kitchen table, brainstorming what I should do next. "You need to get your things," Olivia sighed, her voice steady, "and document everything." "I need to do more than that," I replied, a plan beginning to form in my mind. "I need to make them face the reality of what they've done to me." For the next few hours, Olivia and I strategized. I would return to my parents' house that night to gather my belongings, but I wouldn't leave without leaving something behind. Something that would make them confront the truth about how they had treated me all these years. "Are you sure about this?" Olivia asked. "It could burn bridges permanently." I thought about my laptop, my years of work, gone without a second thought. I thought about all the times I'd sacrificed for Madison's benefit, never getting anything in return. "Some bridges need to be burned," I said firmly. "It's time they learned I'm not their doormat anymore." It was nearly midnight when I pulled into my parents' driveway. The house was dark, except for Madison's bedroom light on the second floor. I took a deep breath, grabbed my key, and let myself inside, moving quietly, hoping to avoid any confrontation. The house felt different now, knowing I wouldn't be living there anymore. I made my way up the stairs to my room, only to freeze when I saw my door ajar. The light was on, spilling out into the hallway. I pushed it open slowly, and there she was, Madison, standing in front of my mirror, wearing my favorite dress, a black cocktail dress that I had bought for job interviews. Clothes were scattered across the bed, drawers left open, half empty. "What are you doing in my room?" I demanded, my voice sharp. Madison jumped, but quickly recovered, smoothing the fabric of the dress. "Oh, it's you," she said casually. "I'm just seeing what fits me." "Dad says you're moving out anyway," she added, as if my leaving was just an afterthought. Her tone made my blood boil. But I forced myself to stay calm. "That doesn't mean my clothes automatically become yours." Madison shrugged, twirling in front of the mirror. "Mom said I could take whatever I want." "You don't need fancy clothes for waitressing." I bit back, the angry retort on the tip of my tongue. This wasn't about clothes. This was about respect, boundaries, and the years of entitlement she'd been allowed to get away with. "Where's my laptop?" I asked, my voice low. "Dad sold it to Walter." "Next door," Madison said with a smirk. "His daughter's starting college. He got $1,200 for it. My new phone only costs $800, so I get to keep the difference." My heart sank. My $2,000 laptop had been sold for $1,200, just so Madison could have spending money on top of a new phone. Did it ever occur to anyone that it wasn't Dad's to sell? Madison rolled her eyes. "Don't be so dramatic. It's just a laptop. Besides, you still live here rent-free." "Not anymore," I replied, pulling my suitcase from under the bed. "And I've never lived here rent-free." While Madison continued trying on my clothes and making snide remarks about my style, I methodically packed up what I could. Clothes, toiletries, important documents, anything that mattered, the few sentimental items I couldn't bear to leave behind. All the while, Madison watched with detached curiosity, as if my life falling apart was just a mild entertainment. For her, "So, are you really going to pay my tuition?" she asked, her voice casual. No, I answered flatly. Dad's going to be so mad, she added, almost gleefully. He already promised the university he'd pay by Friday. This was news to me. If Dad promised to pay, then why was he telling me to do it? Madison shrugged. He said something about teaching you responsibility. Also, I think they're having money problems. Mom had to return some stuff she bought last week. I filed that information away as I continued packing. When Madison finally left, wearing my dress and taking several other items with her, I moved quickly. From beneath a loose floorboard under my desk, I retrieved my emergency fund, $3,000, in cash that I'd been saving for years. My parents had a habit of borrowing from my bank account, so I learned to keep cash hidden. Next, I went to my closet and pulled out a box of records I kept over the year's bank statements, showing withdrawals I hadn't made, notes detailing loans my parents had taken from me, and copies of bills I paid for the household. It was all there, a paper trail of financial abuse dating back to my first job at 16. I worked through the night, organizing the documents and making copies of everything. At 2 a.m., I drove to a 24-hour copy shop to print final copies and compile a folder. When I returned home, the house was quiet. I made one last sweep of my room, then carried my suitcase and bags to the car. Before leaving, I placed the folder. I prepared prominently on the kitchen table, where it would be seen first thing in the morning. On top of the folder, I left a simple note. The truth about who had been supporting whom. No more. As I backed out of the driveway for the last time, I felt a strange mix of emotions. Grief for the family support I never truly received, fear for the uncertain future ahead, but also an unexpected sense of liberation. For the first time in my life, I was taking control of my own story. It was 4:17 a.m. when I finally pulled away from my parents' house. As I drove toward Olivia's apartment, I glanced at the dashboard clock. In a few hours, my family would wake up to find the folder I had left behind. They'd see everything: the years of exploitation, the financial manipulation, and the hidden truths. The folder I left contained years of meticulously documented financial records, my parting gift to a family that had taken me for granted for far too long. The first section of the folder highlighted every unauthorized withdrawal my father had made from my bank account over the past 6 years. Each one was carefully annotated, showing what the money was supposedly for house emergencies, helping with bills. Just until payday. The total came to $8,347. This was money I had earned by working evenings and weekends while maintaining a full course load. The next section was a comprehensive breakdown of the household expenses I had covered since I turned 18: utility bills, grocery receipts, home repairs, everything with my name on it. These documents proved I'd been paying approximately 70% of the household bills for the past 3 years. Despite being a full-time student, I was covering $1,450 a month, far more than would have been fair for someone in my situation. The third section contained records of all the loans my parents had taken from me over the years, money for everything from Madison's dance lessons to my mother's dental work to my father's car repairs. None of these loans had ever been repaid, despite repeated promises. The total amount came to a staggering $15,283 over 6 years. Section 4 was the most personal to me. It documented the college fund my grandparents had set up for me. When I turned 18, I was told the money was gone due to market fluctuations, but my research uncovered the truth. Bank records showed systematic withdrawals made by my parents, draining the account over several years. The total amount diverted was $22,500. I included copies of Madison's failed college transcripts records my parents had hidden, while continuing to fund her education. 3 different programs, each one ending after only 1 semester. Thousands of dollars wasted because no one had held Madison accountable. Perhaps the most damning evidence was the proof of ownership for my laptop. I had kept the receipt showing I bought it myself, along with the warranty registration in my name and the insurance policy I had taken out on it. I included a screenshot of comparable models online, showing that the true value of my laptop was closer to $2,000, not the $1,200 my father had sold it for. At the end of the folder I included 3 final documents. The first was a formal invoice for all the unpaid loans, unauthorized withdrawals, and the stolen laptop, totaling $25,830. The second was a letter from my friend Trevor Hawkins, a law student specializing in family law, outlining the potential legal consequences of financial abuse and theft. The letter explained that while I preferred to resolve this privately, I was fully prepared to pursue legal action if necessary. Finally, I included a copy of the police report I had filed regarding the theft and unauthorized sale of my laptop. I hadn't named my father directly, but the report would establish a legal record of the incident. On top of all that, I left a brief note attached to the folder. It was clear and to the point. I would have no contact with any of them until full restitution was made for what had been taken from me over the years. The morning after I left, I settled onto Olivia's pull-out couch, physically and emotionally drained. I hadn't gotten much sleep, but the few hours I did get were enough to clear my head and make me realize something. I had taken control of my life for the first time. But I also knew that my family would react to what I had done. As the hours passed, my phone buzzed relentlessly with missed calls, texts, and voicemails. The first text was from Madison, sent at 7:14 a.m. "What did you do? Mom and Dad are freaking out." I opened the message, then scrolled through the increasingly frantic texts that followed. "Dad's face is purple. Mom's crying. They're saying you're suing us. Are you insane? Call home right now." My mom's voicemail started angry but quickly turned to panic. "Brooke Elizabeth Wilson, you come home this instant and explain yourself. How dare you leave such slanderous documentation?" Then they shifted, pleading with me. "Brooke, please, we need to discuss this as a family. Your father is very upset. There are explanations for everything in that folder. Please call us back. We can work this out. We love you." The most direct text came from my father. "You ungrateful child. After everything we've done for you, this is a gross misrepresentation and you know it. If you pursue this ridiculous vendetta, you'll regret it." As the morning wore on, the tone of his messages began to shift. "Brooke, let's talk about this reasonably. We can come to an arrangement about the laptop. Call me now." I couldn't help but notice how quickly he went from rage to calm negotiation. I wasn't interested in hearing any more of it. The most surprising message came from my grandmother, Eleanor, my father's mother. She usually stayed out of family conflicts, preferring to maintain peace. But her message was anything but peaceful. "Brooke, it's Grandma Eleanor. I've just spoken to your father and I don't even have words. I had no idea things had gotten this bad. Your grandfather and I are coming to town tomorrow. Do not respond to your parents until we've had a chance to speak with you. Call me when you get this." I played the message for Olivia, and she raised an eyebrow. Wow, Grandma Eleanor sounds furious. She's never taken sides before. I nodded, surprised by her reaction. She always tries to smooth things over. Maybe she can't smooth this over, Olivia. Maybe this time it's too big to ignore. I turned off my phone to give myself some space from the constant barrage of messages. I knew it was only a matter of time before they realized the truth, and I was ready for whatever came next. Later that afternoon, Richard, my manager at the diner, called Olivia's landline. He was concerned when I didn't show up for my shift. "I'm so sorry," I began, but Richard quickly cut me off. Olivia explained the situation. "Take today off," he said. "But I can offer you extra shifts starting tomorrow if you need the money. And I can give you an advance on your pay." His kindness moved me. "Thank you, Richard. I'll be there tomorrow." It was overwhelming to realize that while my own family had failed me, so many others were there for me. That afternoon, a small group of friends gathered at Olivia's apartment to support me in practical ways. Jessica brought her spare laptop for me to use. Nathan, a computer science major, offered to help recover any cloud backups of my work, and Melissa arrived with groceries and home-cooked meals for the freezer. "We've got your back," Melissa sighed, hugging me tightly. "Whatever you need." Around 5 p.m., Aunt Diane arrived at Olivia's apartment, her face grim but determined. She didn't waste time with pleasantries. "I went to your parents' house," she said, settling into a chair. "It's chaos over there. Your father is raging, your mother is calling everyone looking for money, and Madison's having what can only be described as an identity crisis." "What do you mean?" I asked, still processing everything. "Apparently, finding out your parents have been lying about the finances for years can be pretty destabilizing," Diane said dryly. "But that's not why I'm here." She reached into her bag and pulled out a folder, setting it on the coffee table. Madison's tuition was paid weeks ago, she said, her voice quiet but firm. "By the trust fund your grandfather set up for both you girls." I stared at her in disbelief. "What trust fund?" Diane's expression pained. "Your grandfather established equal trusts for both you and Madison when you were born. You were supposed to be told about it when you turned 18, but Frank convinced the trustees that you weren't responsible enough to manage your own money." The revelation hit me like a physical blow. "So there's money for my education?" I asked, barely able to process this new information. "Yes," Diane confirmed. "And it's considerably more than what's been spent on your current degree. The trust was designed to cover undergraduate and graduate education, with the remainder becoming available to you when you turn 25. I felt my heart racing. "But my father told me I needed student loans. I've been working 2 jobs to avoid debt." Diane's tone turned sharp. "Frank has been controlling your trust funds as a trustee. He's been using yours to cover Madison's expenses after she burned through her own with those failed college attempts." The scale of the deception was overwhelming. Not only had they taken advantage of my work ethic and sense of responsibility, but they had actively hidden financial resources that were rightfully mine. "Can we fix this?" I asked, my voice trembling slightly. Aunt Diane smiled grimly. "Your grandmother is already on it. She's flying in tomorrow and bringing the family lawyer. Your father's days of financial manipulation are over." As Diane left, promising to return with Eleanor the next day, I sat in stunned silence. The situation was far worse than I'd realized, but strangely, my position had never been stronger. This wasn't just about parents taking advantage of their child. It was clear financial misconduct with legal implications. "What are you thinking?" Olivia asked quietly, watching me. I took a deep breath. "I think the folder I left behind was just the beginning. There were bigger truths that still needed to come to light." A week after my birthday, I was settling into the spare bedroom at Aunt Diane's house. She had insisted I stay with her rather than imposing on Olivia any longer. Her quiet suburban home provided a much-needed respite from the chaos of the past week. Tyler, my cousin and Diane's son, was home for spring break and had been keeping me up to speed on the family drama. "It's like a soap opera over there," he said, sprawled in an armchair in the living room. "Uncle Frank is trying to do damage control, but no one's buying it anymore." According to Tyler, my folder had triggered an explosion of family secrets. Madison had a complete meltdown upon discovering that our parents had lied about the financial situation for years. She found out they had been using her trust fund to cover household expenses after draining mine. "She's furious," Tyler said. "She's been told all her life that you were the responsible one while they've been mismanaging everything." "Has she spoken to you?" I asked, surprised that Madison might actually be taking my side. Tyler shook his head. "Not directly, but Grandma says she's been asking questions about you, how you're doing, where you're staying. I think she's processing a lot right now." Meanwhile, my mom had been calling every family member, trying to get money by claiming it was to help poor Brooke, who ran away. But that story quickly fell apart when people started comparing notes and realized Karen was telling different versions of the story to different relatives. The most shocking development, though, was that my father was facing serious questions from his own mother, Eleanor. At 76, Grandma Eleanor wasn't one to get involved in family disputes, but she had arrived at my parents' house with her attorney in tow. "She's demanding a full accounting of every penny," Tyler said, his voice tinged with admiration. "Grandma is on the warpath." She told Uncle Frank she's removing him as trustee of all family funds and is considering legal action if he doesn't cooperate with a full audit. Family members were divided, but contrary to what my parents had expected, most were supporting me after seeing the evidence I had provided. For years, my parents' favoritism toward Madison and their expectation that I should be completely self-sufficient hadn't gone unnoticed by others. Many of our relatives were relieved that someone had finally stood up to the unfairness dot at around 6 p.m. The doorbell rang. Tyler peeked through the curtains. "It's Madison," he said, his surprise evident. I hesitated. Was I ready for this? Confrontation? But curiosity got the better of me, and I nodded to Tyler, signaling for him to let her in. Madison looked different. She was subdued, her usual confident swagger replaced with an awkward hesitation. She stood at the door, clutching her purse, unsure of how to approach me. "Can we talk?" she asked, her voice small. Tyler made himself scarce, leaving us alone in the kitchen. We sat across from each other, an uncomfortable silence stretching between us. "I didn't know," Madison finally said, her eyes brimming with emotion. "What exactly didn't you know?" I asked, keeping my voice neutral, trying to understand where she was coming from. "That you were paying bills," she admitted quietly. "That Mom and Dad took money from your account. That they sold your laptop without permission." She looked up, her eyes red-rimmed. "I didn't know they were using my trust fund after emptying yours." I studied her face, searching for signs of manipulation or insincerity, but found only confusion and hurt. "They always told me you were happy to help," Madison continued, "that you were the responsible one who understood family obligations. They made it seem like you volunteered to work those jobs." I let out a deep breath. "I never volunteered to support the family, Madison. I was told it was my duty while you were told to focus on being a teenager." Madison winced. "I know how it looks, like I was spoiled and didn't care. And maybe that's true. But I swear I didn't know they were putting everything on you." For the first time, I started to see Madison in a new light. Maybe she wasn't entirely to blame for everything. While I had been financially exploited, she had been kept in the dark, treated like a child, never given the chance to grow up. "Why? Did you fail out of those colleges?" I asked, my voice blunt. Madison looked startled by the question. I hated the programs. Business administration, then pre-law, then accounting. None of them were what I wanted. She paused before continuing, her voice quieter this time. "But Dad insisted they were the only worthwhile degrees." This was new information to me. I had always assumed Madison's academic failures were due to partying and lack of effort, but I didn't know she'd been pushed into fields that didn't interest her. "What did you want to study?" I asked. "Education," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I want to teach elementary school." I blinked in surprise. Dad said that was a waste of money. I could feel a shift in the conversation, as if for the first time, Madison was opening up about the pressure she had been under. The weight of our parents' expectations had been crushing her, just as much as it had crushed me. "Why are you here?" I asked directly. Cutting through the tension, Madison took a deep breath, then pulled an envelope from her purse, sliding it across the table toward me. Inside was $800 in cash. "It's for the phone," she explained. "I didn't know Dad sold your laptop for it. I thought they bought it for me because I did well on my midterms." I stared at the money, processing the gesture. It wasn't about the cash itself, but about what it represented, her acknowledgement of what had been taken from me. Before I could respond, the sound of screeching tires interrupted us. Through the window, I saw my parents' car pulling into the driveway. "They followed me," Madison said, her eyes wide with panic. "I didn't tell them I was coming here." I swear. Moments later, my parents were pounding on the front door, shouting for me to come out. "You don't have to see them," I told Madison, surprisingly calm. "We can call the police if they won't leave." "The police?" Madison asked, shocked by the suggestion. "They can't just show up and demand anything anymore." I explained. We're adults and they're trespassing if Aunt Diane wants them gone. As if on cue, Diane returned from grocery shopping, taking in the scene with one swift glance. I'll handle this, she said, striding toward the door with purpose. I couldn't hear the exact words exchanged, but I could tell by the tone of Diane's voice that she wasn't backing down. Within minutes, a police car pulled up, and the officer spoke briefly with my parents before they finally returned to their car and left, but not before my father shouted, "This isn't over, Brooke." What he didn't know was that he was right, but not in the way he thought Dot. As my parents' car pulled away from Aunt Diane's driveway, a man in a suit appeared behind them. He walked toward the house, carrying a briefcase. "That's Grandma's." "Lawyer," Madison whispered, her voice a mix of fear and curiosity. The lawyer approached the front door, handed Diane an envelope, and quickly left. Diane opened it, then looked at me with a serious expression. "It's an official notice of an emergency hearing," she said. "They want you to appear next week as well as your parents." I stared at her, still processing everything. "A hearing? For what?" Diane placed the envelope on the table. "For the trust funds," she said quietly. "Your grandmother has had enough. She's taking control now, Brooke." The weight of what was happening hit me hard. This wasn't just about my family, it was about something much bigger. For the first time, I realized how deep the financial manipulation had gone. I had trusted them, believed they were looking out for me. But in the end, they had taken advantage of me for years. The family fallout was reaching its peak, and there would be no going back to how things were before. But as I watched Madison staring at the legal papers, I saw something I hadn't seen before, a strange mixture of fear and relief. She knew everything was changing. "You've got to be kidding me," Tyler said, sitting next to me on the couch after Diane left. "This whole thing is insane. Your dad is trying to make it look like you're the one at fault, and now Grandma's on the warpath." I nodded. "It's unbelievable, right? But at least things are starting to make sense." Tyler leaned back, a thought crossing his mind. "What do you think's going to happen now?" I wasn't sure what to expect, but I knew one thing. This wasn't just about money. It was about control, and it was time for me to take back what was rightfully mine. Dot, as I sat there, I couldn't help but wonder what would come next. I had spent so many years being the responsible one, the one who always sacrificed for everyone else. But now I was starting to see that it didn't have to be that way. Dot, it was time for me to start living for myself, to stop letting my parents and Madison take what wasn't theirs. The next few days were a whirlwind of activity. Grandma Eleanor, with her lawyer in tow, took charge, and I was surprised by how quickly things were moving. I hadn't realized just how much of a presence she had in the family until now. She was in touch with everyone, gathering evidence, talking to relatives, and making sure that my father's actions would not go unchallenged. Aunt Diane had been a steady presence through it all, offering support and advice. "Your grandmother is right about one thing," Diane said, sitting with me one evening. "Your father's manipulation of those funds has gone on long enough. It's time to hold him accountable." I nodded, feeling a mix of anger and relief. Anger because I'd spent so many years in the dark, and relief because someone was finally standing up for me. The night before the hearing, I spent hours preparing. Diane had helped me organize all the evidence, bank statements, loan records, the police report, everything. It felt surreal to be looking at everything so carefully, but I knew it was necessary. This wasn't just about money. It was about exposing the truth and standing up for myself. The next morning, I got dressed in my best, simplest outfit. I didn't want to make a scene. I just needed to show up, tell the truth, and let the legal system handle the rest. Diane drove me to the courthouse. As we sat in the waiting area, I felt a knot form in my stomach. This was real. It wasn't just some family drama anymore. It was a legal battle that could change everything. As we entered the courtroom, I was struck by how professional everything felt. It was clear that Grandma had spared no expense in making sure we had the best representation. I took a deep breath, trying to steady my nerves. My parents were already sitting at one side of the room, looking tense and upset. I couldn't help but notice how different things felt now. Just months ago, I would have been sitting in their corner, supporting them, letting them call the shots. But now I felt a quiet sense of power, knowing that I had done what was necessary to protect myself. The proceedings started, and one by one, each party had to present their side. Grandma's lawyer made an airtight case, showing how my father had misused the trust funds, taking money from both me and Madison without our consent. He had manipulated the situation to make us feel like we owed him, and now with the evidence laid out before the court, it was clear who the real victim was. When it was my turn to speak, my voice was steady but firm. I explained how my father had taken advantage of me, how I had supported the family while being ignored, and how my personal property had been sold without my permission. It wasn't easy, but it felt like the weight of 1,000 years of silence was finally being lifted. The judge listened carefully, and by the time the proceedings ended, I could see the shift in the room. My parents, who had once held all the power, now looked small and defeated. They had underestimated how much I had learned, how much I had fought back. The hearing ended with a decision that felt like a small victory. My father was removed as trustee of the family trust, and he was required to repay all the money he had taken. The funds would be properly managed from now on, and both Madison and I would have access to what was rightfully ours. When we left the courthouse, Diane gave me a hug. "You did it," she said, her voice full of pride. "You stood up for yourself. You've shown your family who you really are." It felt like a weight had been lifted from my shoulders, but I knew there was still more to come. This was just the beginning. In the days following the hearing, life began to feel like it was slowly settling into a new rhythm. The emotional aftermath of the court case hung over me like a heavy cloud, but there was a new sense of clarity in my life. The truth had been exposed, and my family couldn't ignore it anymore. For the first time in my life, I wasn't hiding. Wasn't pretending things were fine just to keep the peace. Madison, surprisingly, began to reach out more. She seemed to be processing everything, trying to make sense of the fact that everything she had been told was a lie. She called me a few days after the hearing, her voice hesitant but sincere. "I don't know what to say, Brooke," she started, sounding almost apologetic. "I had no idea it was this bad. I'm sorry for everything." I took a deep breath, trying to keep my emotions in check. "I know, Madison." "I know you didn't." "No, but I need you to understand how much it hurt. It wasn't just about the money. It was about always feeling like I was invisible." Madison was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "I want to change. I don't want to be like them anymore. I'm going to apply to college again. This time for something I want to do." I was shocked. "Really?" "Yeah," she replied. "I've been thinking about it a lot. I want to become a teacher. I always loved kids, and now I realize that's what I'm supposed to do. Not what Dad wanted." Her words hit me harder than I expected. After everything, Madison was the last person I thought would ever stand up for herself. But here she was, making the decision to pursue something for her own happiness, not to please our parents. The next few weeks were a blur of changes. My parents tried their best to sweep everything under the rug, but it was clear that things had shifted irreparably. My father continued to avoid acknowledging what had happened, while my mother left tearful voicemails, apologizing but never taking full responsibility. But despite their attempts to make things seem normal, nothing would ever be the same again. Moved into a new apartment that my grandmother had arranged for me. It was small but perfect for me, with a cozy living room and a little balcony overlooking the city. I felt like I was finally starting to build something for myself. For the first time, I wasn't living for anyone else. I was living for me. At work, things were improving as well. Richard, my former manager at the diner, had become a close friend, and he was offering me more shifts. One afternoon, he pulled me aside and said, "You've got so much potential, Brooke. If you ever want to do something bigger, let me know. I can connect you with some people who might be able to help. His offer meant the world to me. It was validation that, even after everything, I still had value outside of my family's dysfunction. A few months after the hearing, things began to feel like they were falling into place. I graduated with honors, despite the setbacks. I had secured a full-time position at Callahan Marketing Group thanks to my hard work and determination. And Madison? She did what she promised. She enrolled in an education program at the state university and was thriving. We still had a long way to go to rebuild our relationship, but for the first time, it felt like we were moving forward together, not in competition, but as equals. As the year went on, I began to take control of my life in ways I had never imagined. My relationship with my parents remained distant, but it was becoming clearer that it was for the best. I had built a new support network, people who truly cared about me, who saw my worth beyond what I could give them. Then on my next birthday, I had a moment of reflection as I looked around at the people who had supported me through the hardest year of my life. Olivia, Aunt Diane, Grandma Eleanor, and even Madison. I realized something. I didn't need to wish for anything. I had already been given the greatest gift of all, a chance to start over, to live my life on my own terms. A year passed since that birthday, and it felt like everything had changed. The hard lessons I had learned were beginning to take root, and I found myself at a place I never thought I would be. Content. The relationship with my family remained strained, but I had learned to accept that. I had set boundaries, and for the first time, I was putting myself first. I no longer felt obligated to be the one to hold everything together for people who never appreciated me. I still had moments of sadness when I thought about the years I'd spent feeling invisible. But now those memories didn't hold the same weight. I had created a new life, one where I was no longer defined by my family's dysfunction. I was writing my own story. Olivia and I had become even closer over the past year. She had always been there for me, but now we were truly more like sisters. She had supported me during the darkest moments of my life, and I had helped her with her own struggles as well. We were a team, and I knew that no matter what, she would always have my back. Then there was Ethan. It had started slowly, just small moments of kindness and shared interests. He was my neighbor, a graphic designer who worked from home. He had helped me move in when I first arrived at my new apartment, and we had exchanged numbers. At first, it was just casual texts about books, restaurants, and local spots. But over time, those conversations deepened, and we began spending more time together. It wasn't just that he was kind, it was that he saw me for who I really was. He didn't ask anything of me, didn't expect anything in return. He respected me, and that was a new experience for me. Ethan was unlike anyone I had known, and slowly, I began to realize that maybe I was ready for something more. 3 months into our friendship, Ethan took me out to dinner. It was simple, nothing fancy, but it felt special. After dinner, he drove me back to my apartment, and as I was about to get out of the car, he reached over and took my hand. "You know," he said, looking at me with that gentle smile I had come to love, "I've had a crush on you since the day I met you." I was taken aback, but a warm smile spread across my face. "Really?" He laughed softly. "Yeah, you've got this strength about you, even when everything's falling apart. It's impressive." For the first time in a long while, I allowed myself to believe that maybe I deserved someone like him. We began dating soon after that night, and it was unlike anything I had ever experienced. Our relationship was built on mutual respect, honesty, and the understanding that we both had our own lives, but chose to share them with each other. About a month into our relationship, Grandma Eleanor surprised me with a gift. It was an envelope, and when I opened it, I found a deed to a small piece of land in the mountains, a property that had been in our family for generations. "Your grandfather always intended for you to have this," Grandma explained when I called her. "He saw something in you, Bruca resilience, a connection to the land. It's yours now. It's a place for you to do with as you wish." Tears welled up in my eyes as I hugged the envelope close. The land wasn't just a piece of property, it was a symbol. A symbol of my grandfather's belief in me, of my family's history. and of the new beginning I had fought so hard for. That summer, Ethan and I spent a weekend on the land, just the two of us, walking through the woods and talking about our hopes for the future. The peacefulness of the place helped me reflect on everything that had brought me here. I realized that, despite everything, I had found a way to rebuild my life. Back in the city, things continued to fall into place. I had settled into my new job at Callahan Marketing, and I was being recognized for my hard work. The company offered me more responsibility, and I took on a leadership role in a new project. I felt proud of the person I was becoming, confident, driven, and independent dot, but the most important part was that I no longer needed approval from anyone. Not from my parents, not from Madison, not even from my former self. I had created a life that was entirely my own, one built on the foundation of truth, self-respect, and the courage to stand up for what I deserved. A year later, I stood at my birthday dinner surrounded by a group of people who truly cared about me. It was a quiet evening, but there was a warmth in the room I had never felt before. Olivia, Aunt Diane, Grandma Eleanor, Ethan, and even Madison had joined me to celebrate. Looking around, I couldn't help but marvel at how much had changed in such a short amount of time. The people who had once overlooked me, who had treated me as less than, were now the ones standing beside me, showing me love and support. The room was filled with laughter, conversation, and a sense of belonging. I had finally found my place in the world, not with my family, not in the role they had assigned me, but with people who valued me for who I was. Ethan, who had come into my life in the most unexpected way, sat next to me, his hand resting on mine. The connection we had built over the past year was deeper than I had ever imagined. It wasn't just the love we shared. It was the partnership, the mutual respect, the understanding that we both had our own lives, but were choosing to share them with each other. As we ate, Grandma Eleanor raised her glass, a proud smile on her face. "To Brooke," she said, her voice steady, "for having the strength to stand up for herself, for rebuilding her life, and for the courage to create a future on her own terms." Everyone raised their glasses, and I couldn't help but feel a deep sense of gratitude. This was the family I had built, not one defined by blood or obligation, but by choice and mutual respect. Later that evening, as the party wound down and the guests began to leave, Madison lingered behind. She had changed, I could see that clearly. Gone was the girl who had been spoiled and entitled. In her place was someone more mature, more thoughtful. Someone who, like me, had finally begun to realize the importance of standing up for herself. "Hey," she said, her voice a little tentative. "Can we talk?" I nodded and led her to the balcony where we could get some privacy. The city lights twinkled in the distance, and for a moment, it felt like we were the only two people in the world. "I know we've been through a lot," Madison began, her eyes searching mine for approval. "And I know I can never fully make up for everything, but I just want you to know that I see you. I see what you've done, and I'm really proud of you." I was taken aback. Madison had never spoken to me like this before. For so long, I had thought of her as the person who took everything for granted, but in that moment, I realized we were both just trying to find our way in the world. "I'm proud of you too," I said, my voice soft. "It's been a rough road, but we're both making it. And maybe, just maybe, we can build a better relationship from here on out." Madison smiled, a genuine warmth in her expression. "I think we can." That night, after everyone had left, I sat on my balcony reflecting on everything that had brought me here. It hadn't been an easy journey, and there were still challenges ahead. But I finally felt like I was living my truth, building a life. I could be proud of Ethan came out to join me, sitting next to me and wrapping his arm around my shoulders. "You know," he said, his voice calm, "you've come a long way, and I'm so proud of you." I rested my head on his shoulder, feeling a sense of peace I hadn't known was possible. "I've come a long way," I repeated, smiling, "and I'm finally ready to start living for myself." I was no longer the person who had been hidden in the background, constantly overlooked. I was standing tall, finally living for myself. The relationship with my parents remained distant. They continued to send me messages, some apologetic, others accusatory, but I had learned not to engage. I had drawn a firm line in the sand, and I was no longer going to allow them to manipulate me. For years, I had allowed them to make me feel small, but I was done. The path to healing required me to walk away from that toxicity, and I was at peace with that decision. Madison and I had begun to rebuild our relationship, though it was slow. There were still moments of tension, times when old habits surfaced, but we were learning to communicate honestly with each other. She had found her path in education, and she was thriving. I could see the difference in her, the way she was finally pursuing something that truly made her happy. For the first time, she seemed to understand the importance of taking responsibility for herself. Ethan and I had grown even closer. Our relationship had blossomed into something real, built on trust, respect, and love. We had a solid foundation, one where we each had our own space to grow while also sharing our lives. He was supportive without being overbearing, kind without expecting anything in return. For the first time, I felt truly seen and loved for who I was, not for what I could give or what I could do for someone else. A few months ago, Ethan and I had taken a trip to the small piece of land that Grandma had given me. The cabin needed work, but the land was peaceful, quiet, and beautiful. I felt a deep connection to it, to my ancestors, to the life they had lived, and to the one I was building. We spent the weekend there, working together, enjoying the simplicity of the place, and dreaming about what it could become. It felt like a fresh start, a place where I could truly begin to heal, to create something that was entirely mine. As I stood on the balcony of my new apartment that evening, I realized just how far I had come. The past year had been filled with challenges, but those challenges had shaped me into the person I was becoming. I was no longer afraid to speak up for myself, to demand the respect I deserved. I had found my voice, and it was loud, clear, and unwavering. When I thought back to the girl who'd walked out of her parents' house, unsure of where she was going, I hardly recognized her. That girl had been afraid, uncertain, and certain about her place in the world. But the woman standing on the balcony now knew who she was. She knew her worth, and she was ready to face whatever came next, no matter how difficult or uncertain. Phone buzzed in my pocket, and I smiled when I saw it was a text from Ethan. "Dinner tomorrow at 7?" I typed back quickly. "Absolutely." My turn to cook. I laughed softly, realizing that for the first time in my life, I wasn't afraid of the future. The hardest choices had led me to the most beautiful beginnings. And whatever came next, I knew I could handle it. As I closed my phone and looked out at the city lights, I made a silent wish. Not for success, not for wealth, not for anything material, but for peace, for the strength to keep moving forward, and for the courage to continue building the life I had always dreamed of, one of independence, love, and true happiness. The next chapter of my life was just beginning, and I was ready.